This weekend, we've got a potential Super Bowl matchup happening at Ford Field as the Lions take on the Buffalo Bills. And joining me now to break down this super matchup is Alaina Getzenberg, Bills beat reporter for ESPN. We've got two of the top offensive teams with the highest point differentials in the league. The Bills have scored more than 30 points in like 5 or 6 games, but the Lions have put up 250 burgers. Are you expecting a shootout on Sunday?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think we've seen both of these offenses have so much success this season. And yes, the Lions defense has been fantastic, but we've seen this Buffalo Bills offense and really Josh Allen just prove to be unstoppable as of late. He's actually 3 touchdowns away from 35 on the season, which would be his 5th straight season with 35 touchdowns, which would be an NFL record. So he's just on another level right now, and that's to go with the rest of the offense that they've got going. And then, you know, this Bills defense struggled last week against the Rams, and I think the Lions are going to give them a lot of issues. So this could be a lot of touchdowns, which I think would be an exciting game, but also I don't know what's happening to defenses, but like it's going to be a high-scoring game, and you know there's injuries on both sides, especially on the defensive side of the ball. So I think that'll also help make this a pretty high-scoring affair.
There are just so many storylines for us to look at. These teams are tied for red zone touchdowns at 37 apiece, second most in the league, in addition to touchdowns scored on 4th down 4 plays each. Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady was actually on the Saints staff with Dan Campbell, but what can you tell us about how he's really taken the reins in his first full year at the helm?
It was so funny when we talked to Joe Brady this week. He actually brought up, like, kind of unprompted how he spent time with Dan Campbell on that Saints staff, and that when Dan Campbell was kind of teaching the tight ends, Joe Brady learned from him in that tight end room because Joe Brady was just an assistant on that offensive staff, and he's really taken over this offense. This is not the same Bills offense we've seen in years past. Joe Brady, when he came in during the season last year after Ken Dorsey got fired, he ran the ball. That was a big thing about a Joe Brady offense. He loves to run the football, and they've done that. This is the highest designed rushing plays of Josh Allen's career this season because they're trying to put less on Josh Allen's shoulders, and that's in the form of James Cook primarily. And he's got 11 rushing touchdowns this season, and no running back Josh Allen has had in his offense has come even close to that number. Like, we're talking LaShawn McCoy times when we were reaching that number. So it's about running the ball, but it's also they are not afraid to put the ball in Josh Allen's hands. That's, of course, throwing and rushing, but it is a huge, I think that's the big signature of the Joe Brady offense is they're going to run the ball a lot more, and they're going to, if it's the same play, running it over and over again like they did against the 49ers, they're going to do that.
They're not afraid to pound you into the ground. They're empowering all of the tools around Josh. As people who have covered Buffalo, it's been a long time coming, like you said. These are 2 MVP-looking quarterbacks, but one, like you said, is a little more of a rushing threat than the other. Josh has 416 rushing yards this year, the 2nd leading rusher when it comes to what the Bills are putting on the ground. What is the best way that you've seen teams at least try to neutralize him in the pocket?
So this is actually something really interesting, Rachel. I kind of was like looking at some Josh Allen stats when he's inside, outside the pocket. And one thing he's doing a lot this season compared to other years is he's not actually throwing from outside the pocket as much as he used to. So it's something where teams, you have to pressure Josh Allen. You have to try and do that. But he now has this ability to throw inside the pocket and have success there. So you really you can try to get him outside the pocket, but it brings a new threat now that he's much more accurate and much more able with weapons like Khalil Shakir, who has been getting a ton of yards after catch, where he can find those guys downfield, inside, outside the pocket, but it is absolutely, Josh Allen is a rushing threat. There's no other way about it. So you can try, I think maybe there's just no answer sometimes, where it's you can try to get him outside the pocket and you can pressure him, but then he's going to take advantage of who you've left open downfield. So it's a weird thing where people have tried to solve the issue, and because he's gotten even better as a pocket passer, there is less of an answer, I think, for where you kind of want him to be on that field.
We'll see if the Lions can solve the riddle this week. We know that Shep and Glenn are very against the QB spy method, so we'll have to see if there is a method to take Josh Allen down. Last week wasn't great defensively. As we know, the Bills allowed their season high in yards total and 3rd down conversions. But when a player that hasn't played in 7 weeks, Aiden Hutchinson, is still leading all of the Bills in sacks, what has been the struggle this year with the Bills' pass rush?
So coming into this season, the defensive line was a concern. This was supposed to be, the Bills did not invest a lot this season in a lot of areas because they're a little bit in they're taking on Stephon Diggs' cap hit. They're going through a lot of different things. So the defensive line, they didn't necessarily put a ton of money into this offseason. Of course, Von Miller missed 4 games with a suspension. He has had a great year, but he's actually off to an okay start. So that's also a component to it. But they just have not they like to mix in a lot of guys. They really love a defensive line rotation, and they just have not been able to get guys going consistently. Greg Rousseau's had a actually really great season, but it hasn't come in the form of sacks. They're 29th in quarterback contact, so that's bad. It's not good. It's definitely an issue for this defensive line, and it's come up. I think the Rams game was a key example of that. Was like they're getting some pressure, but they're not getting all the way there. So their pressure numbers are a little misleading some of the time because they're getting past offensive linemen, but they cannot get the job done, and that's a huge issue, especially in the middle of the defensive line. Their defensive tackles have not had a great start to the season, and I think an offensive line like the Lions have can really take advantage of it.
And there have been a couple defensive efforts by committee, if you will, coming out of Buffalo. When you look at 6 players each having 2 takeaways to their name, that's tied for 3rd most in the league, while here Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch are basically running that show. How has that evolved throughout the secondaries? Dominance, but also now you're coming over to the NFC side of things.
For sure, and we're seeing a new, I think this is a good thing for maybe teams who aren't, fans who aren't as familiar with the Bills. They've got new safeties back there. Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Micah Hyde is now back on the team. Didn't think I'd be saying that maybe a couple weeks ago, but he is on the practice squad. But they've got new safeties back there in DeMar Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, who are actually both questionable for this game with injuries, which would be huge absences for the Bills. But so they've got these new guys back there that's just not the same communication-wise. They're still going through the kinks there. It's just a different kind of group. They've dealt with a lot of injuries, especially to nickel corner Taron Johnson, who's the key piece to this defense. They will be without cornerback Rasul Douglas for this game, which is a huge deal. And it'll either be Jamarcus Ingram or Kyrie Elam in that spot, neither of whom have a lot of experience really at this point in their NFL careers, just recently playing a lot of games. So that is going to be a struggle for this Bills defense, and it is something where they have a lot of takeaways. So before the Rams game, they had the league longest takeaway streak. They were getting the ball, but it just is not one guy, which is kind of, you want to see that on a defense.
Absolutely.
You want to see a lot of guys involved, but they just haven't had there's been consistency issues where it's some guys up, some guys down, getting in, getting out, and I think that's what's led to that. Mm-hmm. But they're a different defense than we've seen in years past, too, where they're finding different ways than maybe, we would see a Micah Hyde interception be a more regular thing. And now it's guys who maybe names aren't as familiar taking their hand in this defense, and they're going to need them to step up this week especially.
That's a good point about guys taking inconsistent up and down reps, whereas here it's just been next man up, bulldozing through this whole season. I think this was a great primer for anyone who hasn't watched as much AFC ball this year, wants to be as prepared strategically as possible for Sunday's, dare we say, super matchup. I'm so glad to have you in town. We will have all of the coverage because kickoff is right here at 4:25 p.m. on CBS Detroit. And of course, the NFL Today is coming back to Detroit. That party starts at noon.